guys, it's Mage right here. So today we're going to be looking at the next build, the Ragefire Signifer, which kind of leaps off of that previous build. This one goes even crazier, where we're aiming for +5 damage per dice. So like at level 10 or whatever, if I throw a fireball, that's 10d6 plus 50. So here's kind of the rundown of how we're getting that. It's a little bit wacky for sure. So we're doing Blood Rager again, though, level 1. And then we're going into Sorcerer, and then Hellknight Signifer. Uh, Goal here is to just be a heavily armored arcane blaster who rages to supercharge the spell damage, which is, I think, pretty good. This is mostly going to be into fire. Your fire is going to hit that +5 only, really. Your other spells will hit +2. And we're going to be able to cast in Mithral Full Plate with 0% arcane spell failure rate. And yeah, we're going to be able to just nuke stuff while being quite tanky. So breakdown is we're taking that level 1 of Blood Rager, so we get blood casting, and then it just makes it easier to qualify for Flumefire and other pieces as well. And also gets us medium armor for eventually going into Hellknight Signifer. There's definitely some other pieces in there that are good to have as well, though. So then we go into Sorcerer. We're taking Cross-Blooded. We're going to grab the Orc Bloodline, +1 damage for all spell dice. Draconic Bloodline for fire for +1 to all fire damage dice. But you could choose a different element if you didn't want to do the Flumefire. But in this instance, we are, because that is the theme. And then we're taking Bloodline Mutation, Havoc, once again. Getting into those evocation spells after taking spell focus evocation. So that's kind of how we're going to hit the +3 there. And then we have Flumefire for +5. After that, we go into Hellknight Signifer, so we can get that additional 5% arcane spell failure reduction at level 3, heavy armor proficiency, and it also just gives us a bonus feat for arcane armor mastery at level 2 in there. So we combine that with arcane armor training and Mithral Full Plate, and that gives us 0% arcane spell failure and Mithral Full Plate. So that's kind of the dream there. So there's definitely a lot of blast potential with this build and a lot of damage that we can certainly do. We're quite tanky. We're going to take a good Constitution modifier. We also have Blood Rage, so our hit points can hit pretty high. Danger with that always is if Rage ends, you can die very easily with a build like that, but just kind of a cool thing to kind of play with. And then if we can empower that Fireball, we can get some really gross damage going on for sure. You definitely could also make this into a bit of a melee variant build if you really wanted to, but it just kind of felt like it played better as more of a full caster, because Blood Rager's biggest issue was we just didn't have enough spells, really. I mean, we could still be a Blood Rager and get some Nova off, some big blasts, but couldn't do it all day. Sorcerer can do it for quite a while, so. Well, yeah, some very important feats we're going to need. Mad Magic, Flumefire Rage, obviously, Spell Focus, Evocation, arcane armor training, and then kind of after that you're kind of able to play with the feats how you want. I obviously recommend Empower because that is what we were built to do, is to just big damage, but you could definitely go in different directions. And like I said, you don't have to do the Hellknight Signifer with this build. Like, you could just do like a Sorcerer and go a totally different route than what I've suggested. You could even do electricity or something else. You don't have to follow this exact outline, but this is just kind of what I'm going to be playing next time, and are very likely going to be playing next time. And I thought it was a very cool build and had a lot of interesting synergies. And it would be quite neat. We're also going to grab a trait called Magical Knack. Just put it in the Sorcerer. Just offset some of the caster level from the Blood Rager dip. You don't have to do this if you're fine with being a caster level down. I just feel like it was good to have it because we are a caster level down, and I mean, that is part of how we blast. So, but some other feats you can look at getting are Intensify Spell, Spell Penetration, Magic Trick Fireball is also fantastic if you just want to go utterly ridiculous into fireballs. So there's definitely some pretty good stuff there. Some good spells, like I kind of mentioned, like anything with fire is kind of what we're going for this build, but you can definitely choose different kinds of spells if you want to. If you want to go into electric or cold or acid, there is definitely ways around that. I definitely do recommend still grabbing Magic Missile and stuff, so it's going to be able to automatically hit something. Glitter Dust at level 2 is also really good, even though it's not really what synergizes with our build necessarily, but it works on so many things. It's just good to have in there if you have the spell slots. The downside is we have less spell slots because crossplay, or not spell slots, but spells now. And then we also can grab defensive spells like any other caster if you want to, like Mirror Image and stuff like that. But mostly we're going to grab Burning Hand, Scorching Ray, Burning Arc, Fireball. Battering Blast is very good because it It's not a fire spell, but it's still very, very solid. Haste is always good on any caster. Rage is good to take in this one because we don't have to blood rage to necessarily trigger Flumefire. You can do it with the rage spell. So if you wanted to just skip blood rage, you could do that, but you're going to lose all the armor and other things like that. And also it takes longer to set up because rage is free. But it is a worthy consideration. Um, if you really just want to go all in. Displacement's also good. I like Ice Spears. I always take it pretty often if I can afford to get it in there. You can do Controlled Fireball, Dragon's Breath, Fire Shield, Wall of Fire, Fire Snake, Chains of Fire, Sirocco, Hellfire Rage is just really dumb. So all very good spells to sneak into there. This calculation is not correct though, because I don't believe Hellfire Ray counts as a fire spell. Weirdly, it is considered evil, so I don't think that actually is correct. That I have on the spreadsheet here. Would be great if it is though. I mean, you might be able to spin that with some GMs. They'd be crazy to let you do it though, because that spell already does a disgusting amount of damage. But kind of what we're looking at here is if we can throw a 10d6 fireball, it's plus 50 damage, so we're looking at 85 damage before we look at an empower. If you empower it, then we're looking around 128, which is pretty good. Now you can also get like Magic Trick Fireball, or if you can get a way to sneak in intensify with it, you can definitely get it much higher. As I said, with armor defenses, we're going to get a Mithral Full Plate because we're going to have 25% arcane spell failure reduction. Mithral Buckler has 0% to begin with. The only thing we're looking to, and they also have 0% armor check penalty. So even though, actually, I can't remember if we are proficient with shields, but even if we aren't, it doesn't matter because there's no armor check penalty because there's just no armor check penalty, so there's no minus to anything really. Not that it matters because we don't usually attack with this build except for raise, so the armor check penalties usually only really mess you up when you're attack rolling things. And like I said, it's 0% arcane spell failure on a Mithral Buckler, so we're good to go there. Strong, so we have some pretty strong AC for a caster. We're gonna have pretty good hit points, with blood rage and stuff, and also we're just gonna have solid con investment. And yeah, it's just kind of good to trigger that rage spell for sure if you do run out of rage rounds. And it is worthy consideration to take the extra rage rounds feat if you want to keep up on that, because we aren't going to be super good at that. Like we're probably only going to have like 10 to 12 rounds a day if we got like a good belt or whatever later in the game. So you might need to burn a feat for it. I think there's also a trait for rage rounds, but I could be mistaken on that. Items, we're kind of like the basic stuff. Mithral Full Plate, Mithral Buckler, Ring of Protection, Amulet of Natural Armor, Cold Grip Resistance. Like I said, a Belt of Con is really good. We want to get a Charisma item for sure to keep up with those spell DCs. We could get some more Runes of Power if we're concerned about the amount of spells we have, but probably not too worried as a sorcerer. Definitely can grab some good rods, Empower rods, things like that. We definitely could dabble in melee. Like since we're on a full plate, we have the gauntlets on anyway, so like we absolutely could flank with somebody if we had to, or something got on top of us. But it's probably not going to be necessary. One kind of idea I did have was you could definitely run like a Blood Arcanist as well with this, but they don't get Blood Havoc, and you only get one Bloodline, so you really only made like a +3. But it is an interesting idea as an Arcanist. I mean, Arcanists do have some pretty cool things with their exploits, so I mean, could be a cool way to play that class if people really wanted to give that a shot. But yeah, that's kind of like the big thing. And then yeah, since we're cross-blooded, we do lose some spells known, and that does kind of suck because like you kind of get a little bit more behind on how many spells you can cast and stuff like that for spell levels. But and like I said, if you want, you could just do one, and I would pick Orc because Orc Bloodline is just smoother for spell access, but you only go to +4 damage. And it is a bit janky going into Blood Rager with just Orc Bloodline because they don't really have one, so gets a bit finicky. I think that's most of that stuff. And then lots of people seem to always think that you can't use you can't take like I guess the parent class or whatever with like the new double classes or whatever, like with like how Blood Ragers, Sorcerer and Barbarian or whatever. But you definitely can. That used to be a rule in the playtest. As far as I've been able to tell, there is no rule precluding you from dipping sorcerer into blood rager. In fact, the thing even says that you just have to match bloodline, so that's why orc gets a bit iffy. But a cross-blooded sorcerer who's draconic and orc, you're just gonna have to take draconic bloodline when you go into it. Not that it's a huge deal. We're not really in draconic to really get a lot of the bloodline stuff. And I guess one final piece is you could sub out your familiar for your bloodline. I think on Blood Rage you can take it at one, and you could potentially do like the valet. When I was talking to one guy on Reddit the other day or whatever, and he kind of had some good suggestions for taking that and grabbing. I think it's like vocal. I think it's like vocal choir or whatever, and they can turn your spells into sonic spells, which obviously not fire spells, but still it's a +2 damage or whatever to them, and like lots of things are resistant to fire, unfortunately. So, but yeah, you can get like your a teamwork feat for you or whatever, and your familiar, and they just have to make a performance check, and if they succeed, it turns it into a sonic spell basically. I don't know exactly what level they get all like access to all those things, so we'd have to look at that. That might not be very attainable without getting access to a familiar on this character, but the other large build definitely could. And this one could if you really wanted to fit feats in, or probably just with a different sorcerer archetype potentially. But that might be tricky because we are pretty locked into cross-blooded, and that does kind of edit your bloodline. So you're probably not going to have a lot of access to trade things around. So you could use some feats though for the familiar bond. But just some interesting thoughts for sure. So yeah, this is the build. Let me know what everybody thinks. If there's any issues or any ways you think you can improve it, or any variations you might use of it. Because, like I said, I don't think this is the strongest version that you could do of the build. I think it's just kind of a neat like flavored aspect of one that could be kind of fun to play, and I'm gonna try. And it does seem reasonably solid. It's probably not the best thing I've ever played for sure, but it's got a cool a theme to it. I really like that part, and there's definitely still reasonably strong and has a lot of potential. But if there's things that people see that are maybe wrong with the build, or have suggestions on how to make it better, then yeah, just throw it into the comments. I would certainly appreciate it. But this is it, and it should be pretty solid. So cool. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see some more stuff like this, throw a subscribe button. Sorry, hit a subscribe. And then I think that's mostly all I have. I think the next one I'm going to be doing is just kind of a bit of an update, like on the Blood Rager stuff that I got some suggestions on. And then we'll probably jump to another build or topic. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a good day.